Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start off by introducing to you the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, Her Excellency Patricia Espinosa, who has been visiting Fiji to discuss our presidency of COP23, the United Nations negotiations on climate change. As you all know, Fiji has been chosen by the international community to preside over the next conference of the parties in Bonn, Germany, in November. As I've said before, this is a huge responsibility that Fiji has been given, and we intend to fulfill our obligation to every person on the planet by doing everything possible to move these negotiations forward. I want to formally welcome the Executive Secretary to Fiji on behalf of the Fijian people. During our discussions over the past couple of days, he has already proved to be a good friend of Fiji and has undertaken to do everything possible to assist us with the task that lies ahead. We very much appreciate the commitment she has already shown. Your Excellency. Our talks over the past couple of days range across Fiji's obligations and responsibilities as the incoming COP president. The Executive Secretary and a team have given us a detailed briefing and assured us of the highest level of cooperation from UNFCCC to make these negotiations a success, especially for the people of low-lying and vulnerable areas of the world, such as Fiji. These discussions have been very valuable in giving Fiji an appreciation of what needs to be done. We are currently putting together a Fijian Secretariat to work closely with the UNFCCC Secretariat in Bonn, where the actual COP will be held in November. Fijian administrative team will also be in Bonn in the next 2 to 3 weeks to meet with German authorities to view the venue site and handle on-site organization of the gathering itself. But before that, we will be holding a pre-COP meeting in Fiji in October, which will be an important scene setter for the main event. There we will lay the foundation to ensure our negotiations at the main event are as seamless and successful as possible. So there is much to do in Fiji in terms of preparations, as well as the preparations we are making with Germany and the UNFCCC to make the larger COP23 gathering a success. As I've said in my New Year message to the nation, we need the support of every Fijian, every Pacific Islander, and every global citizen to make our voices heard and ensure that the momentum of the Paris Agreement on climate change at the end of 2015 is maintained. The Executive Secretary and I both agree that the world cannot afford to drop the ball on this issue. And I certainly don't need to remind any Fijian on the importance of this after tropical cyclone Winston. The rising sea levels that continue to encroach on our low-lying areas, and of course the changing weather patterns. So, Executive Secretary, I want to warmly thank you on behalf of the Fijian people for the commitment you are showing to Fiji by being here with us. I again pledge publicly that Fiji intends to make COP23 an unqualified success on behalf of the global community. And now I invite you, Excellency, to say a few words before we take questions from the media.
Prime Minister, I want to, first of all, thank you and your team for having hosted me and my team to this beautiful part of the world. It is our first visit here to Fiji, and we are looking forward to coming again. So we are very happy that you will be hosting the pre-COP in October. So that will give us again, at least once during this year, the opportunity to come back here to this beautiful country. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor to meet with you and to be able to share with you some comments about the meetings that we had with the Prime Minister and his team on preparations for COP23. This was not, by the way, the first time we met with the Prime Minister. We had met in Marrakesh in the framework of the conference when the international community took the decision to give Fiji their role of president of COP23. Since then, we have immediately, with a very strong leadership by the Prime Minister, embarked in good preparations. We have had some members of the Fijian government visit Bonn in order to get to know more about the details of the different issues that are taken up in the framework of this very big conference, COP23. So I want to thank you, Prime Minister, for taking up this huge responsibility in very challenging times, and also for the way that you are personally taking up the leadership of the group that will be responsible for this important task in your government. Thank you very much. Fiji is the first small island state to lead this enormous multilateral process. It has become probably the biggest multilateral process that takes place, the biggest conference that takes place every year. And this is a conference that is so central to the life of island countries, to the life of vulnerable countries, to the life of people in low-lying areas. So I am particularly touched and grateful for the Prime Minister's willingness to take up this big challenge. As he was mentioning, the last 2 years have seen really major achievements in the area of the fight against climate change. In 2015, the Paris Agreement was adopted, and last year, less than 1 year later, we could celebrate its entry into force and the first meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement. So there has been important political momentum maintained, not only the governments, but also the business and the civil society have shown enormous interest and I would say enthusiasm if we judge from the amount of people that came, for instance, to Marrakesh in order to show the solutions and their experiences that they have done in different scales in order to fight climate change. So the big challenge, as the Prime Minister was saying, is to keep that momentum. 2017 and the Fijian presidency of the COP will be one very important moment in order to cement what the international community has been able to draw as a very clear line of action towards the future, towards a low-carbon future, towards a future where the needs and the challenges of vulnerable countries are fully taken into account. So the role of Fiji in guiding this process all along this year is going to be very important. As an active member of the UN, Fiji has contributed significantly to many multilateral processes and enjoys, therefore, great credibility and prestige. And this is what explains the fact that Fiji was chosen by the international community to lead this important process. In Marrakesh, we launched the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action, which provides a way for stakeholders, non-party stakeholders, people in business, people in the financial community, people in civil society, to engage in a very active and specific way towards the achievement of the commitments that parties have undertaken under the Paris Agreement. In this area, the conference has designated what we call climate champions, and the Prime Minister has already also designated his climate champion. So he will also be contributing greatly to this process. I would like to stress that we came here with the message that for the UNFCCC Secretariat, supporting the Prime Minister as President is our core business. Him, of course, and his team, because there are too many things going on. He cannot do it alone. So I want to underline this. This is really the core of the business of the Secretariat. So I want to reaffirm my personal commitment and the commitment of my team here in Fiji and my colleagues in Bonn to make all what is under our ability to ensure a successful presidency for Fiji. And that means also, of course, supporting the pre-COP in October that will be held here in Fiji. We have made very good progress in the exchange that we had with the Prime Minister and the team about the different responsibilities, different events that will be taking place all along the year. Of course, many things will need to be adjusted depending on how realities evolve. But I am going to be leaving Fiji this afternoon with a very strong sense of gratitude and of satisfaction for having achieved a lot during these 2 days. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Sorry, as I stated, we've got a secretariat here in Fiji that we've put together. And that's the team that's going to go out and do a lot of negotiations on our behalf. But that's one of the things that we need to look at, are the differences between the countries, especially the bigger economies and vulnerable ones like ours. And that's one of the issues that we need to deal with.
I think this is a very good question. The Paris Agreement, one of its most important features probably is the fact that it recognizes these differences between countries. And it has allowed countries to put forward their commitments in terms of reduction of emissions according to their own realities. So I think that the Paris Agreement is a good framework in order to a good starting point. It provides a framework, and it's a good starting point that requires, of course, raised ambition over time so that we can get to the 1.5 degrees as a limit for global warming as is needed. But there is this recognition, it's intrinsic to the Paris Agreement. Well, first of all, I would say that the Paris Agreement has entered into force. It is an obligation now for all the countries that have signed and ratified it. As of yesterday, there were 127 ratifications. So that means that for us in the Secretariat, the road is very clear. Our obligation is to foster the implementation of the commitments that countries have undertaken under the Paris Agreement. And of course, we follow closely all the positions by the different countries, but we are most willing to engage in dialogue and constructive cooperation in order to strengthen this agenda that is so important for the livelihoods of so many people around the world.
As you know, the Paris Agreement came into force with the full backing of the U.S. government then. Last year, it still had the backing of the U.S. government, and so word has now come up from the new administration that Donald Trump, of course, President Donald Trump is pulling out of the deal. But we are going to work on that. Of course, we have the opportunity to go and see him and invite him to Fiji, and we will do so. We have done that before. We have invited him to come to Fiji to have a look at what Fiji is going through and what the small island Pacific nations are going through with regards to climate change. So hopefully, if he gets here, he may be able to change his mind.
Okay, good.